the latest, I think, when it comes to the war between Iran and the United States, one of the latest news is that how, we've learned that CENTCOM commander Admiral Brad Cooper has briefed Donald Trump in the Situation Room about the potential final blow to Iran, according to Fox News. And what does it mean, Ted, for you to understand the situation? It seems that something big is going to happen anytime soon, or a new round of war. I don't know how long does it take, or are we going to see the same sort of 40 days or more than that, or some, as they call it, the final blow? I don't know. What is your understanding of the current situation?
It's very hard for me to understand the mindset that's going on. I assume that these military, most of these military people are, at least in practical terms, competent. Some of them, of course, more than others. But um, I think there has to be an understanding that they're not going to bring Iran to its knees. So I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, if they do anything like strike, power facilities or infrastructure, critical infrastructure in Iran, it's going to precipitate a retaliation that I don't know. I don't see how Israel and the United States can cope with. The American bases in the Persian Gulf are already hardly operating. I mean, most of the people on these bases have had to leave. They can't protect them. So I don't know what Iran would do, but probably it would just continue where the critical nodes within these bases. A lot of them have been destroyed, so the real utility of the bases are lower than the fact that there's a lot of buildings still standing. But one of the things you can do is just do more general damage to the bases, and the other thing that, of course, would be serious for the Israelis is for Iran to go back to its full-scale attacks on Israel, both of which I would expect. So I'm not clear what the upscale side of this attack would be. There's a news report I just read actually this morning that the Americans just delivered a shipload, some 11,000 tons of military equipment to Israel. I assume a lot of it is just dumb bombs and things, but I just don't know. It just means it's just going to be stuff to drop on Iran. But again, where are they going to drop it it's very hard to see how it's going to make a military difference. The critical infrastructure that Iran needs to continue fighting the war is all underground. And there's no evidence that the underground structures are in any way vulnerable to these above ground attacks. There's modest levels of damage to entranceways, yes, but these structures have been very well designed so that you damage one entranceway, there's another available. So I really don't see how. It seems to me that if you had a realistic assessment of what the situation is, you'd say to yourself, "We're in an end game, and we just better try to resolve this in a constructive way." That's the way I would assess the situation. So I have no idea what these people are doing. My joke with some people is it's not I not only don't understand what they're thinking, I don't even understand if they're thinking. It's that kind of thing. So maybe there will be a big attack. Won't surprise me, but I also will not be surprised if There's no real, certainly no military consequence to it. There may be more innocent people killed, which is, of course, extremely unfortunate. But I don't see how they can exact, really do significant military damage. It's just not in their reach. So I don't. I don't see anything but an end to the ceasefire if they go ahead and do something. And that's not in their interest. It's really not in their interest.
Ted, considering what has happened so far, and when you see someone like General Keith Kellogg mentioning that they can go in the Hark Island because they want to reduce the Iranian capability or ability to export oil. So let's go to the Hark Island, an island that is going to the to the eastern to the western part of the Strait of Hormuz, goes up, is not even close to the Strait of Hormuz. But his argument is, let's capture that island and put pressure on Iranian economy because I think the Trump administration is getting to the point that the blockade is not working. Is not working, and
Of
that's
course,
why
sure.
they need to do something else. And here, what Keith Kellogg is talking about, they'll go and invade the Hark Island and maybe put pressure on Iranian. And how is that going to militarily? How is that a reasonable or even viable choice for them?
Well, the argument, which I don't think is correct, is that it causes economic problems for Iran. They don't have the ability to produce and sell as much oil as they have been doing. But so what? I mean, the Iranians are pretty tough. You know that. So, and they're in a war for their survival. At least they believe it. And I agree with them actually. But you know, you're not going to cause these people to cave in. You know, they have a they have a highly sophisticated, developed society. They've got thousands of years of culture behind them. You know, it's silly to think that these people are going to cave in. And what they're going to do is we will leave them. We, the Americans, will leave them, and the Israelis will leave them no choice but to continue doing horrendous damage to the global economy, which of course will cause tremendous damage to the United States, tremendous damage to Israel, but more importantly, to the world. And I think we're looking potentially at famines down the line, because of all the losses of fertilizers that we're seeing. We're looking at tremendous impacts on the manufacturing capability, the high tech production of chips and things because of the lack of things, special materials like helium. This is the implications of this are profound and very, very far reaching. But I don't think I don't get the sense that the people in the White House understand this, or they're either they're denying it, or there's nobody who talk. It's these people live in a bubble, and incidentally, it's true of most of these political people. It's a problem generally. I've talked about this on occasion on your program because I meet these people, and they think they know things because somebody in the intelligence community tells them something. But I have had access to the intelligence. I had full clearances to everything, and let me tell you, if you don't know before, specific pieces of information can be helpful. They can be helpful. When you're doing your job. But if I want to know, what is our best assessment of the weight of the the Sarmat missile, because, okay, I'm doing an analysis, I'm trying to understand something. But, generally understanding the world, you're not going to get from these intelligence briefings because, first of all, when you get the general briefings, they're idiotic because they're driven by all kinds of bureaucratic and internal kinds of prejudices, and so you don't get anything. If you want to read a book about Iran, you don't read the intelligence. You read books about Iran, and by authors who know the country. And the only way to do that, to become educated, is to read open literature and to understand what it means. And most of these people in government jobs understand nothing. I had a conversation with this president of the and CEO, both of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists last week. It was incredible. This woman understood nothing. And not only did she understand nothing, she didn't care. I actually lost my temper. And I know she thought that it was because I know she thought it was because I was just generally cantankerous. I lost my temper because she was so indifferent during this discussion. She knew nothing. She arranged the meeting without reading a thing. She had no idea what she was starting. My wife, who's a senior executive, when my wife heard that how this meeting was conducted, her first statement was, you'd be fired in the job I was in if you ever conducted a meeting this way. Coming into a meeting knowing nothing, not having read anything, prepared in any way, and this is this is she was in the government at a job, and my guess is if the Democrats retake the White House, she'll be back in the government in a job, not knowing anything, indifferent to the real facts, and this is common. This is not uncommon. What's uncommon is when you meet a person like a Chaz Freeman, who's from a different generation. If you listen to Chaz talk, you can see what an erudite, well-educated person he is. He didn't learn that in the government. He learned what was going on in the government. He has experience. He understands how to work the system, what's going on in the system. That you learn when you're in government, but you don't learn. All that erudition doesn't come from being in the government. None of it comes from in the government, and so you have these people. They talk to each other. They think they know something, but they know nothing. They really know nothing. And the White House is a very extreme case of that. But let me tell you, when you look at the Democrats and the Republican senators and members of Congress, they're largely ignorant. They just, and their staffs are largely ignorant. And, sometimes you meet a person who really knows something. No question, there are good people in these jobs, but they're few and far between because they're not really well educated. They just don't have this background knowledge. And that comes from education, and it comes from a sense, from an impulse to be inquiring. You have to have an it's the I don't know if I've mentioned this. Schopenhauer has this way. He calls Schopenhauer's idiot. He talks about idiots are people. They can be well educated. They can be intelligent by the measures that are used to measure intelligence. They can do arithmetic. They can read. They can remember historical facts. But they're idiots because they have no ability or willingness or character, as sometimes the way he might state it, to open their mind and eyes to the world around them. What they know is what's in their bubble, and there's no looking outward. And he argues that most people are just, functionally idiots, and you see that. I think I mentioned this in one. So I don't know if it was here, but I was in a meeting with McGeorge Bundy, very late in his life, and this guy, he wouldn't even look at you when you were trying to talk at him. You know, he wouldn't even look at you. Would you know? He just like you weren't in the room. Now the guy was very, he was knowledge, he was intelligent in the sense that he was he was a person of substantial intellect, but he was functionally an idiot. And of course, his policies were functionally idiotic too. And that's that's an extremely capable person by the simple measures of capability, not the broader ones. And and most of these other people are not even close. They're not even well educated. They go to prestige schools, but they don't learn anything. They sit around congratulating themselves at how much smarter they are. They think they know more than everybody else. They think they're experts, and they don't even know. They know, and it's just shocking once you step back and look at it. So who knows what these military officers understand, and of course they are under tremendous pressure. You can't go in and talk to this guy Trump and say, "Look, Mr. President, this is silly. We can't. There's nothing militarily useful we can do." You go in there and do that, you're going to be fired. And some of them, some of them want to do the job more than they want the job. And we've seen some of these really fine military officers fired by this guy Hegseth. These are the kinds of officers I want in the American military. But they paid the price by just saying, "Look, I'll give you the best answer I can give you, but it's the truth. Sorry, I don't want to hear that. You're fired." So who knows what's going on in these briefing rooms, with the president? No way of knowing. Trump is obviously completely out of touch. It was a little article. I don't spend a lot of time on this because I don't see it as actionable information that from what I do. But I was just reading an article, and this article was from insider discussions, which I believe are real, and this particular report this journal article was saying, well, Trump no longer compares himself to Washington and Lincoln as presidents. He now compares himself to Alexander the Great and Napoleon. And he's like, what is, I mean, I know the guy has a problem. I mean, we all knew that before, but something else is going on now. I mean, there's some kind of serious, significant mental deterioration going on further beyond what he already had, which was serious enough. So who knows what's going on in these briefings? I just have no way of knowing. But it's really a problem. Yeah. And nobody in the U.S. government wants to stand up and do anything about it. Nobody in a position to make a difference. So not yet.
Ted, yeah, sorry for interrupting you. If they decide to attack Iran again, how do you see the situation with the stockpile of the United States? Because you mentioned sending missiles to Israel or bombs to Israel. But how do you find these reports, for example, on CNN, which says in some areas, considering JASMs, considering the interceptors, TAV interceptors, Patriot PAC-3, and our friend of this podcast, Larry Johnson, believes that the situation is far worse than what was reported on CNN.
Wouldn't surprise me. I think Larry is very informed, and I haven't been focusing on that, although I've been listening. And there's very little doubt in my mind that we are very short of weapons. But some of these weapons don't matter. For example, the Patriot PAC-3s, they've had almost no intercept capability against the ballistic missiles. So the fact that they're running out is really irrelevant. in terms of, for example, for the Israelis. The things that could be important for the Israelis are, for example, the Iron Dome interceptors, which also are useless against the ballistic missiles from Iran, but they are capable against drones. And the problem is that they've depleted most of their Iron Dome interceptors, shooting at missiles they have no chance of intercepting. They made a strategic blunder there. So I think the bulk of the damage that will happen once things get back going, and it looks like they will. I mean, it looks like at some point we are going to see the Iranians again launching attacks on Israel and elsewhere, and I think over time the bulk of the damage is going to be from drones. The warheads are smaller, but they're much more accurate. There are large numbers of them. And, over time, you can do a tremendous amount of damage with these significant but smaller warheads. Plus, what you can do with the ballistic missiles, which are not, which are significant by themselves, but, somewhat less precise. So I think Israel's in for a real bad time once the ceasefire ends. And what worries me about Israel is that the political leadership is so crazy that eventually they could reach a point. It's not immediate. It's not immediately in front of us now, but it could be over time, where they start losing. It becomes so apparent that they're losing to their own population that they start feeling pressure to think about using nuclear weapons against Iran. I don't believe the Iranians would, it's a funny situation. All this talk about the fear of Iran using nuclear weapons on other states. It seems to me the Iranians are extremely well thought out so far on this. Of course, now that the Americans and the Israelis have killed off much of the older leadership, there's a lot of younger leadership that may be more radical, and that's really potentially problematic, because it really is in Iran's best interest to not build nuclear weapons, but to be poised to build them. I mean, they have the perfect. Just by accident, a few days ago, I was having a chat with a very old friend of mine I hadn't talked with for a long time. It turned out he had been in Iran quite a while back during the negotiation for the JCPOA, and he was quite involved in it. And he was telling me about a conversation he had with Mohammad Zarif, the negotiator of the JCPOA, a very erudite man. I mean, tremendously well educated, very sophisticated man. And this friend of mine was telling me how Zarif described to him why Iran should not have nuclear weapons. And he went through the argument I just gave you. In fact, what got me started on this with my old friend is I was telling him my assessment of why it's not in Iran's security interest. And he said, well, that's exactly what Zarif told me. Zarif had thought it through completely. And it wouldn't surprise me if Zarif and others are the architect of this policy once the JCPOA was abandoned. This policy of building up to 60% enriched uranium as a potential threat to be a nascent nuclear weapon state. Would not surprise me if he played a role in that strategy, which is a brilliant strategy. The strategy is, look, we don't want to become a nuclear weapon state. You can see we have the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors here. They're watching. We don't mind, but but we have this stuff now, and We can do it if we need to, but we don't want to. So that's a very good posture to have. And I think, in fact, what I wanted to talk a little bit about today was the fact that that posture is still viable, and Iran, and really the most intelligent thing for the United States or the West to do is to recognize the reality of Iran's potential. You can't wish this away. You can't bomb it away. It's all in caves and tunnels. You can't kill enough scientists, because the scientists, it's a country rich in scientists, talented people. The expertise is there and growing. So you have to acknowledge it and deal with it. And you have a country that basically wants you to stop attacking them. And in return, they're not going to build nuclear weapons, although they want to reserve the potential to do it. And you're not going to stop that. So reach a deal, because at some point, if they decide to build these weapons, there's going to be hell to pay for everyone. For everyone. The Israelis are going to be facing Saudi Arabia that's nuclear, Turkey, Egypt. It's not just the Iranians who are smart enough to know they don't want this, but these Israelis, they're just so, they don't, it's like there's no second step in their thinking. It's like dealing with these, like these people at Stanford, my favorite place to kick. They talk about things, and you always say, what's the next step? Mike McFall, you want to get rid of Putin. Well, what happens next? Well, I don't know. Well, you're talking about something, you're talking about policy. Don't you think about, you're supposed to be a policy guy. You run around. Don't you think about what sequence of events mean? The world is a sequence of events. It's happening all the time in front of you. And it's this kind of thinking. You see it, and what I'm worried about is we'll get some people who have similar short horizons in the leadership in Iran, and they will change the policy and proceed to build nuclear weapons, and that will be bad for Iran and for everybody else. But the Americans continue to provide no choice for the Iranians.